Hey guys, welcome to the channel. Today we're going to see some of the common mistakes people do while coding in React. These are the mistakes which I made, so I thought why don't I share with you. If you're still making them, you can fix them. So let's start with the first one, the client and server component. Ever since React introduced server components, there's kind of confusion among developers, which is, rightly so, right? Server component is new kind of paradigm, like you have to think while making React application nowadays, because React had some performance issues while it was running purely on client side. So like React team came up and they're trying to figure out like how can we make it more optimized for server as well, so that you can run your application on server and server shoot the HTML or JSON to the client so that everything is fast and SEO friendly. So without going in further detail, let's see some of the mistakes. So mistake number one while doing React server components is like using this directive, like use client. If you have used it before, when you make a directive, when you add this directive use client, you'll make a component client side. So if you go here, what I'm doing is I'm just loading few components. So first is server component and counter component. So if you see server component, if you go to server component, what I'm doing is I'm just loading some data. So I have this fetch function which is fetching some data and I'm just loading it and I'm importing it here. Other example is this counter component. Counter component is doing nothing. It just has a button which is doing increment or decrement. It's using useStateHook because you can only use those React hooks inside a client component, because this is what going to render on the client side on the browser, and browser has access to a lot of these properties. On server you don't have access to that. So but I do have another component which is text. If I open the text component, you can see it is a server component, because by default if every component in Next.js is a server component. So everything looks fine. Everything is fine. If I increment it, increment is working, everything is fine. If I open the console log, I shouldn't see any complaint. Yeah, I don't have any complaints. So everything is going good. So what if I move this use client? Let's say you forget, or like whatever, like you don't add use client here. Your app will not work because it's saying that you can't use this useStateHook inside the server component. And you try to add that here. You're lazy and you're like, okay, let me add use client just on the page, on the root of these components, right? So page renders these two components. So this is child components from the perspective of page component, right? So everything looks good. There's no error, but if you see the console, it should throw some error, right? It is throwing some error. It says like async await is not yet supported in client side. So what's happening is this function, which is a server component, will not render inside this, because see, when you import use client, you're going to make all your imports client component as well. So this is the common mistake people do. They think I can just randomly add use client and everything will be fine. But no, as soon as you add use client directive, every import will become a client component, and you can't do fetch data. You can't run server side code on client side. So how can you fix that? The first thing you need to do is remove that and add it the proper place. Now everything is work. But you see, we are using this text component, which is a server component. But because this is just text, right, doesn't do anything much. It will render fine, but this will become a client component as well. So if you have some SEO related data here and you loaded that inside the use client, your app will work, but you will not get those benefits. So what you can do, you can take this out and you can put that here, the root, and you can import that guy. And now this will work as a server component, like your application, like this is server component, this is server component, and this is client component. So everything will be fine. So this is the common mistake many of us make while doing React, and this is a kind of new paradigm. So try to learn as much as you can about server and client component. I'll probably be making more videos regarding that as well. And let's see some of the other mistakes developers make. So now let's see the second mistake developers make while working with React. See, the use effect hook is supposed to do a lot of things, but this is kind of confusing for everyone because it is supposed to do everything, right? Literally everything. So if in your application you are fetching data inside a use effect hook, you need to stop that. See, everything looks fine. I mean, I'm fetching this data with the use effect hook and fetching this with the React query. So React query is a library which will help you to fetch data, and it comes with different benefits as well. The first example we have is fetching with the use effect hook, and the second is we are fetching with the React query. And we are not supposed to use nowadays the use effect hook to fetch data, because see how many states we need to manage. We need to manage the data state, the loading state, the error state. Everything needs to be managed, and at the end of that we need to run this cleanup function so that when you unmount this use effect hook, you don't want it to keep on running, right? So you need to do a lot of things. You need to put a lot of checks, and don't do that. Nowadays, no one using the use effect hook for just data fetching. The easiest way nowadays is to use React query. You can install this dependency, and what you can do, you will get this state by default from use query hook, and you can pass on your API endpoint here, and you'll get those states out of the box. And see how much easy and nice it is. Like, you're getting all these states without doing anything. So this is the second mistake. If you're still using the use effect hook, yeah, please stop doing that for data fetching. Okay, so the next example is around state management. So let's say we have two forms. The first form, we have these fields, and we can add like more fields here. We can add like const password, and then we can set it, and probably need to add it here as well. So if you come here, then we have like these fields, right? So in this form component, you have these states. You have name, email, password, and you're doing your handle submit, so that when you submit your form, you have like everything included, right? And we're just console logging. We are not doing anything funny. So this is pretty basic, right? But imagine you have like more state. Like if I add cursor, if I use cursor to add, like it can add like those states, right? So the point is you can have n number of states, but if you're adding a lot of use state hooks, then your code will be too much bloated, right? You are just using use state for individual state. But in the form 2 component, instead of using individual state variables, what are you doing? You're putting your data inside an object. So rather using individual use state hook, you're using just one use state hook, and that use state is managing an object. And if you need more properties, you can add those properties inside this object. That's all you need to do. You can add those properties, and you can have your labels here, but you don't need to manage individual states. So this is one of the most common mistake, I would say, I see. I made a lot of time. So I was like, why I'm doing this? And then I did some research. I was like, man, I should have just used some object instead of putting individual state inside a use state. So these are some of the mistakes which I found developers, new developers, old developers, everyone's making. So yeah, I mean, that was the purpose of this video. I hope you learned something. And yeah, that's it from today's video. I'll see you next time in a new video. Thanks a lot for watching.